View date. Wow, this is the another topic or the another topic under management consultancy. And this is all about stages of management consulting engagement, part one. Now, the presentation of this chapter is quite unique because it is like Q&A, question and answer type of providing information. And we are going to follow the format. All right, so first question is describe the analytical approach and process as applied to MAS engagement. I've recalled that we've discussed this a lot of times that in any management consultancy engagement, analysis, analytical approach or approaches and processes are always applied because whether we like it or not, in this engagement, we will be dealing with information. We make sense of such. We will see some problems in the organization or business or client, and we as practitioners would solve those particular problems because remember, we will be making recommendations out of the conclusions we've made. Then we will be assisting our client, for example, in the implementation of these recommendations. In assisting, we have to take note that our responsibility is just secondary to that of the client because the latter would be having the primary responsibility of applying and implementing such recommendations. So this involves a professional level ability to ascertain pertinent facts and circumstances. We define the problem, evaluate the alternative courses of action because it's possible that one recommendation may not be able to satisfy or would not achieve the intended results. So we should have option B, option C, etc. Then present conclusions, and out of the conclusions, we make recommendations. Next, what are the basic stages of a management consulting engagement? So here are our steps. We have to begin with negotiation. We negotiate the engagement. We plan the engagement, and then we conduct a consulting assignment. So here are our items that are needed for such assignment. So we have to begin with problem identification and solution. So it is a must that we begin with knowing what the problem is. Otherwise, we will not be able to diagnose that properly by providing the corresponding or appropriate solution or solutions. Then we gather data, but we have to make sure that the data would satisfy suitability and accuracy of the information. So the information should be coming from reliable sources. We analyze the data, we diagnose, we develop solution, then we now prepare for our report. So we prepare prior to presenting. It is quite awkward that we present without preparing for the report. Then we recommend solution. After that, we implement. So we again assist our client or our clients in implementing such suggestions. Then we follow up evaluation of the implemented solution. All right. So these are under three. Four is evaluating the engagement and post-engagement follow-up. Our responsibility as practitioners would not end in evaluation of the engagement. So follow-up for that is also needed. Next, what is an MAS proposal letter? So if you can recall, we talked about engagement. We talked about prior to accepting the engagement, there must be thorough discussions and negotiation, and all items should be reduced into writing in a form of a proposal letter. So the proposal letter would be showing or would be detailing all items needed in that engagement. So this is the advisable first step in most engagement. It is written, which is quite good because in case we forget the details and we look back into that. What are the contents? We have the objectives and benefits of the engagement. So what's the purpose and what good would it do to the client? Then scope of the work and role of the CPA. So it has to be clear, or it is to be clear here from the onset that the work should be like this, and then whatever is the role. So whatever is the responsibility of the CPA and the engagement. How do you approach the study? We organize the project, then the fees and billing arrangements, then the qualifications of the firm where appropriate. Next, what are the uses of an engagement plan? What's the point of having the plan for the engagement after having the proposal letter? So this provide a means for arranging, distributing, and assigning responsibility for various segments of an engagement. It is very important that we know who is responsible for what. Then it is a means of control for determining whether all segments of the engagement have in fact been completed. So this is to check whether, let's say we're working in groups, so all aspects of the engagement are completed. Otherwise, we'll not be able to proceed to the next step or steps. Then framework. So what will be our guidelines and outlines for the engagement? Then after that is to facilitate time and efficiency control over personnel assigned to the engagement. So what will be the mechanisms involving the time and efficiency? Then assist in an engagement review by a partner or a supervisor. In this case or manner, the review should be done. Then the review is with the guidance or should be with the enlightenment of a partner or a supervisor. Then provide the basis for estimating fees. What are our causes or drivers for having these fees? Normally, we do cost plus margin basis, right? So whatever is the cost, we put a top up on that. So that will be our basis for estimation. Then give the advantages of preparing a proposal letter. Well, this is the good one. This minimizes misunderstanding between the CPA and the client. Then this assists in better administration of the engagement, so the engagement would be managed properly. 6, what are the factors that should be considered in setting the fee to be charged to the client? So if you can recall, we discussed in the previous videos about not charging the same fees with the clients because each services provided to the clients would be unique with each other, considering these factors. So we have the nature of the MAS job, the job's degree of difficulty and complexity. So some jobs are more difficult and complicated or complex than the others. Then the staff would be, let's say, qualified to do the job. So some are with various qualifications and educational backgrounds, requirements, licenses, trainings, experiences. So with much of those, for sure, the staff would be having higher salaries. The time involved in doing so and technical importance of the service to the client. So what would be the added value of that to the client? Number 7, define an engagement or work plan. So after we make the proposal letter and both parties are amenable to that, so this would be the specific details of the plans in the engagement for conducting a management service engagement and considered as a blueprint of the remainder of the project. After that also or as well, what are the basic contents of an engagement program? So some are mentioned already, like objectives or the purpose, but then now because we are getting very specific, so this would now be the description of each task to be accomplished. What are these tasks, specific tasks, and then description, detailed discussions of each. After that, a description of tangible output required at completion of each task. What should be the deliverables at the end of the day for the task? Then a list of manpower required. Then meaning human resources as well as the personnel. The starting and completion date, so the beginning and ending, and the cost involved, the money concerns. Number 9, describe the activities involved in the problem definition phase, which is the first part, or which is the first step in the actual engagement. So we identify the problem, we know the objectives, the scope, meaning the start and end, and then the coverage, in other words, the breadth and depth of such engagement. Intensity, so how intense or how in depth, how extensive such particular engagement. Time dimension, starting phase and completion or ending phase. The location, so where is it? The human elements, human resources, the support systems, what are the needed items. In fact, the supporting costs normally, especially in the implementation, would be higher than the others. After that, we have the tracking systems related to the problem, then institutional process for managing the problem. So the latter three are more on the systems and processes. Tracking, so how do we trace back or how do we go back to certain trails or audit trails or engagement trails because we are here under management consultancy, then institutional process afterwards. Next, what are the data gathering techniques available to a management consultant? This part here will be talking about the data gathering techniques available to a management consultant. So here are the following ways of doing that or those. Now, please take note that these techniques actually have been tackled by you perhaps in other disciplines or courses or subjects. So interviews, you know, these questionnaires, we ask questions, but then normally we do that also in writing so that it will be easier to trace. Observation, we look at the actual performances of certain procedures or steps in the client or with the client. Document gathering for certain physical documents or source documents. Charting, so we can also gather data by having charts or data flow diagrams, DFDs, system outflows, the flow charts, the charts, and decision tables. After that, give 5 internal sources of data and the corresponding data that may be obtained from such. So we have from these areas the sources and we can get the following facts. So example would be corporate planning. We can look into the objectives and expansion plans. For engineering, the schedule for products. Research and development or R&D, we're now talking about new product development schedules. So it's either new product or developing of existing products. Manufacturing also, we have the inventory status, and then the accounting would be product pricing and costing operating expenses. After that, describe the 4 approaches that the consultant may use in analyzing facts gathered in relation to the problem at hand. So we can look into these 4 approaches or analytical approaches. Decision level is that who makes the decisions in the organizations, and we look into the varied interrelationships among the decisions made throughout the segments and levels of organization. So for sure, certain decisions made from the lower levels would be going upwards, and then decisions made at the top level or upwards would be cascaded towards the bottom. Then input or output analysis. So the inputs vis-a-vis the outputs. What are the inputs, for example, for the information processing, and what are the expected outputs? After that, structured analysis. We're now looking into the number of well-defined functions, let's say the functional departments. And then if we are talking about specific functions in every department, then this would constitute the entire department, so the group of activities. Then less structured analysis would be for the limitations of the structured approaches, then we look into the less structured. So we look into the components or let's say items in that particular structure or functional department. Because of these reasons, difficulty in application and stifling of creativity of the consultant. So the creativity is being limited. Next, explain briefly the steps in the problem-solving process. So I've already discussed these particular items a while ago. So hopefully you were able to look into such. Anyway, we look at the items which are defined. So for problem identification and desired outcome, of course, we begin with initial recognition of symptoms. So what are the symptoms in the problem and ending with the complete problem description. So this is the deliverable. We should be able to write down what really is the problem all about. Then identification of suitable and accurate sources of information and data gathering. What are these reliable sources? And then where do we get the facts? After that, data analysis and diagnosis. So we, as consultants, we have to apply a variety of fact analysis techniques, and then we analyze the data and then determine the effectiveness of each decision made. After that, we look into the 5 external sources. A while ago, if you can recall, we had the internal sources. We can look into the industry reports, for example, and then we can get corporate data and analysis and industry news. So example, for a retail industry, we can look into the news belonging to that industry. Competition will be for the products and the literature involved. Distributors, the facts would be market conditions and customer analysis. Then for the customers, we look into the profile facts, and then the next would be for the database retrieval system. So how do we get the information? We have the product, market, and industry news and analysis and economic forecast. Next, for number 15, discuss briefly at least 5 most commonly used techniques in gathering facts. So we have the 5 items: interviews, questionnaires, observation, document gathering, and charting. For interviews, we've mentioned them already. And then these are just the definitions or additional items that are being discussed. For charting, we look into the pictorial representation of dimensions of the client's organization or of its activities. For the other items, these were discussed and some are just additional inputs again. But I would like to point out for document gathering, we look into relevant documents to gain an understanding of what is presently done and how it is organized, what is not available, and perhaps what the client considers being important. All right, so in other words, we are on gathering data, fact-finding analysis. Next, describe the following approaches to analysis. These are also discussed a while ago, and you may refer to the previous discussions of these 4 approaches to analysis. After that, we now look into the analysis strategy. So how do we strategize in analyzing? What do we do? First is we do categorization. So the data facts or items are being sorted into certain categories or sensical groupings by virtue of their features. Next, classification. We classify them by external criteria rather than by arbitrary features as opposed to letter A. So we look into, or we are going to determine their certain characteristics, and then we compare such with an external criteria, not because of the existing features that they've had. Okay, next is numerical analysis. So numbers are combined in order to understand how they relate to each other. Certain numbers, or could be, let's say, just the codes or the actual peso amounts or dollar amounts of certain items or any other currencies, could be made into some sensical information. Association is recognition of two things that are connected in some ways. There are certain things, two or more, that they have relationships with each other. After that is correlation, that when one varies, the dependent variable would change. So this is correlation. Variation in one variable would cause or occurs in step with that of another, while causation explains correlation. So it suggests that two variables are correlated because there is a cause and effect. So in causation, there's really that this happens for Y because of the change in X. So that's causation. But correlation is just the relationship of two variables or three or more with each other. So they could be slightly correlated, moderately correlated, and etc. There's a table for that, which is discussed in statistics. It's just that for correlation, they are being connected with just the relationship, but not necessarily that one causes the impact of the other. All right. So that's the end of our discussions for stages of management consulting engagement part 1. Next step would be part two of this one. Thank you very much for listening, and God bless us all.